Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Coach Chran's Corner. I'm here with Quinn Kiefer today. What's up, Quinn?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. So the team played Dredge last weekend, and so I've been playing a lot of Dredge lately, and I think it's a really, really fun deck. It's a lot different than your normal everyday Magic. Like, normally with Magic, you're playing some creatures, you're casting spells, playing some removal spells, maybe some counter spells, something like that. But with Dredge, you don't do anything like that. You kind of just, like, mill yourself and then put a bunch of cards in your graveyard, and then you take those cards and they go into play for free. And
Yep.
they can't be countered because you're not casting anything. And then eventually you just kill them with creatures like Prized Amalgam, Bloodghast, and Narcomoeba. It's a really, really neat deck, and I think it's one of the best decks in Modern right now. So I thought that would be a pretty cool opportunity to do a video on Dredge this week. So that's what we're doing. So what do you know about Dredge right now?
Um, I know that there's. I've played it once on Magic Online before.
Played against it once or played with it once?
I've played with it
Okay,
once,
so just a little bit.
and it was pretty hard.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different. But once you get the hang of it, I think it's not too tough. It's just different. So if you don't understand what's going on, it's going to be really hard. But
Yeah,
once you
much
figure it
different than the
out,
usual Bogles I play.
yeah. uh, but Bogles actually is one of the decks that has one of the best matchups against Dredge. So
Yes.
big lifelink creatures are a problem for Dredge.
Yeah.
And then they also have access to Rest in Peace. So yeah, basically what the deck is trying to do, there's three different kinds of effects that you're looking for. You're looking for dredgers. You got Golgari Grave Troll, which is the best one. It dredges 6. Then you've got Stinkweed Imp, which dredge almost as much, dredge 5. And then you got your dredge 3s. You got Life from the Loam and Dark Blast. So you want to get a dredger into the graveyard as soon as you can, usually by the first couple of turns. And you want to get those cards into the graveyard by your red draw spells. So you got a few new red draw spells. Faithless Looting, that one's been around for a little while. Faithless Looting, it's like Careful Study, the old blue card, except it's got flashback. So you draw your cards, then you discard your cards. So if you... Go ahead.
Even if you mill it from your dredge, you can still cast it.
What, the flashback? Yes, that's one of the best parts about the Faithless Looting, is that you don't even have to have it in your hand. You can just mill it over when you dredge and then cast it for 3. So usually the first Faithless Looting, you don't dredge anything, you just play it, and then you discard your dredger. But the second one, when you already have stuff in your graveyard on the flashback, you're going to dredge with the draw 2. Or sometimes you can already have cards in your graveyard with dredge by the time you cast the Faithless Looting. But it's a really good turn 1 play also, because drawing extra cards off the top of your deck can be pretty useful sometimes. The next one is a new card, Insolent Neonate. It's from Shadows over Innistrad, so it's only been around for just a little bit. And it's got Menace. It's a 1/1, so it's a little creature. It usually doesn't do very much damage by itself, but you can sacrifice him and discard a card, usually your Grave Troll, and draw a card, which means you dredge. So when you... there's 2 different kinds of looting effects, basically, in Magic. There's loots and rummages. Loots typically end up being blue. Faithless Looting is a loot, although most red cards are rummages, not loots. With loots, you draw your cards first, and then you discard your cards. With rummages, first you discard, then you draw.
Yep.
So with loots, most of the time, loots are better than rummages in Magic because you have access at looking at more cards, so you get to decide, if the card that you draw is the one you want to discard, then you have more options. So normally it's better. But in Dredge...
But not in this deck.
No. Because what we want to do is we want to get our Dredge card into the graveyard first, and then when we draw, we can dredge it. Can't do it the other way around. So Insolent Neonate being a rummage instead of a loot is a really big deal. It's a really good card to play first. on your first turn to get things started. So, yeah, Insolent Neonate, that's a good one.
For example, Tormenting Voice is another rummage card.
Yes, Tormenting Voice is another rummage card, and so is this next card,
Which is-
Cathartic Reunion, the new Kaladesh card. This is the card that really pushed Dredge over the top. Before Dredge was a good deck, it was probably one of the best, maybe 10 decks in Modern. And if you didn't really respect it, then it could take you by surprise and win a tournament. Now, Dredge is a really powerful presence, and it has a lot to do with this card. So it's a rummage, red and a colorless. As an additional cost to casting it, you discard 2 cards. So even if they counter it, you still get to discard. Normally you have to discard, even though it gets countered, and you also lose all the cards that you discarded, which is bad. But in this deck, you just want to put your cards into your graveyard, so that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And then you draw 3 cards, and in this deck, drawing 3 cards is a ton of cards.
A ton of cards in your graveyard.
Right, because 3 cards, the most we can get, since Dredge 6 is the biggest, we could put 18 cards in our graveyard just by casting 1 Cathartic Reunion. That's like a third of our deck. More realistically, it'll end up being somewhere between
14, something like that?
Sometimes it's like 11 or 10 or something, and then we draw the 3rd card if we don't have another Dredger, or 17, where it's like 2 Grave Trolls makes 12, plus Stinkweed Imp is 5, so 12 plus 5 is 17. Or maybe 2 Stinkweed Imps and a Grave Troll, which makes 16. But difference between 16 and 18 isn't very big. You're putting a massive amount of cards into your graveyard and doing a bunch of really cool things, all for the low price of 2 mana. So this card is unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
Another cool thing that it does is in your post-board games, it lets you dig for your answers to their hate cards, because you don't have to dredge with it. You can if you want, but you could just draw instead and go find your hate cards, or find your like abrupt decays and stuff to get rid of their rest in peace or their Grafdigger's Cages. So yeah, those are the draw spells in the deck, and then we've got the creatures. So let's see, we've got Bloodghast and Narcomoeba and Prized Amalgam. So Narcomoeba's been around for a while. If you know anything about Dredge, you know this guy's always around at the Dredge decks.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. To cast, it's just a blue and a colorless for a 1/1. Not very big, not very powerful or anything. But the nice thing about it is that it's free. It doesn't cost you a card in your hand because you're milling it over your deck. It doesn't cost you any mana to put it into play. It's just completely free. So when you mill it over, so when it's put into your graveyard from your library, you just put it on the battlefield instead.
Which triggers your Prize Amalgam.
It does. Yes, we will get to Prize Amalgam in just a bit. This guy is the real all-star of the deck, I think. The next card we got is Bloodghast. It's another good card that has seen some play in Dredge decks over the years. Bloodghast is another card that's basically free to play. You don't actually have to cast it. If it's in your graveyard and you put a land into play, then you just take it and put it into play. It's got haste if your opponent's at 10 or less, so it's really good at finishing the opponent off when you get to the halfway point of their life total. And yeah, it's another really good card. And then finally, we've got Prized Amalgam. And Prized Amalgam might be one of my favorite cards to come out in the last couple of years. It's just so good at what it does. And being a 3/3, that you basically get to put into play for free is pretty incredible.
Wait a second. Does that thing have 3 arms?
I think so. It's like got an arm and then another arm and then a shoulder that's actually an arm. I don't know what's going on.
That's weird, but it's cool.
It's pretty cool, yeah.
And it's a great card. So
it's so good. So yeah, what Prized Amalgam does is whenever a creature comes into play from your graveyard, so usually it's one of the Narcomoebas and the Bloodghast, then the Prized Amalgam sees that and says, okay, well at the end of the turn I'm coming in too. So it doesn't come in immediately like the other guys do, but once it comes to the end of the turn, then you're good to go, and it'll come in along with all the other guys. One thing to note is that if you put your creatures into play at the end of your opponent's turn, then your Prized Amalgam doesn't come in until the end of the next turn. So that's something that is important for Insolent Neonate, actually. You want to use his ability on your opponent's turn, but you don't want to use it during his end of turn, because if you flip an amalgam and an Archamoeba or something, then you don't get your amalgam until the end of your turn, so you don't get to attack with it. But if you do it in their post-combat main phase or during combat or something, and then you get the cards, then the Narcomoeba comes in, the amalgam triggers, and then at the end of his turn, the trigger resolves and the amalgams come in. Then you get to untap and attack with your amalgams. So it's like one of the neat little tricks that you have to know about with Dredge. But once you know how to do it, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, that was the few things I learned while playing in this deck.
Mm-hmm.
With that one round, I was like, at your end step, I'm gonna do my Haunted Dead, and I'm like, wait, what happened to all my prized amalgams?
Oh no!
And then I realized, oh wait, it's his end of turn, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it comes in a little bit later. One neat thing though about this guy is that, let's say you trigger him and then you mill some more cards and you flip another one, but you don't have any blood gas or anything. So you can put him into play, and then when he comes into play, he triggers all the other ones that didn't get triggered. And then at the end of the next turn, they all come into play. So that's pretty neat. That happened to me once this past weekend. I had like 3 turns in a row where it was like my turn, triggered an amalgam, milled some more, got another amalgam came in, triggered the other one. Now his turn, he bolted my amalgam that was tapped, and then at the end of his turn, the other amalgam comes in, and it triggered the original amalgam. So I had 3 turns in a row where amalgams were coming into play off of each other, which is really cool.
Seems awesome.
Mm-hmm. So then we've got one more type of card for the Dredge deck, and that is cards that do things when they're in your graveyard. And there aren't as many of these, but the big one is definitely Conflagrate. I think Conflagrate is really what makes this particular Dredge deck so powerful. It gives you another angle of attack that if your opponent has been able to deal with all of your other stuff, the Conflagrate can still just put them away, and they can't beat it. It reminds me a lot of Bonfire of the Damned. It's not quite as powerful because it doesn't do damage to all of their things, but based on the amount of mana that you pay for it, you're getting a fireball effect that's really, really, really strong for the cost. So the front half, when you cast it normally, you're not doing that very often. Sometimes you do just for like 1 damage or something, pay red and 2 to do a damage if you really have to kill something, but you almost always use it on the flashback cost. So flashback cost is red, and discard X cards. So like lots of dredgers or prized amalgams or blood ghasts. We've got a lot of cards we want to put in our graveyard. And then it does X damage divided as you choose among any number of creatures and players. So you basically just get to shoot whatever you want, all the things you want. It's really, really strong. It works particularly well with Life from the Loam, because Life from the Loam lets you get all of the lands that you dredge over back and put them into your hand. And then you can just discard them all again to Conflagrate and fire off a really big one, like 6 or 7 damage for 2 mana.
The card seems insane.
Yeah, it's really, really strong. So Conflagrate, I think Conflagrate's one of the best cards in the deck. We've also got a Haunted Dead, which is a nice card for when you mill over, or when you dredge it into your graveyard. You can get a creature back basically at instant speed, discard some cards. It basically kind of like what they do in the standard zombie decks. Discard a couple cards to get your prized amalgams back and put a lot of power onto the board for very little mana. It's not something we want to do all the time, but having one is just kind of nice. The other card we play is Scourge Devils. This guy, there's an argument for playing both Scourge Devils and Rally the Peasants. Let me see if I've got a Rally the Peasants. We can compare them. Rally the Peasants. Oh, looks like I don't, but that's okay. Do this. There we go. Rally the Peasants. White and 2, creatures you control get +2/+0 until the end of the turn, flashback. So you kind of mill that over, and then you flash it back, and it makes all your creatures big, which is pretty good. One of the nice things about this is that it's an instant, so that you can attack with all of your creatures, and you can threaten the Rally to trade up on your guys. So like, let's say they've got Reality Smashers or some sort of Eldrazi or Tarmogoyfs or something, and you've got prized amalgams. You can just attack with the prized amalgams, and they can't block, because if they do, then you just cast a Rally out of your graveyard, make it bigger, and trade, which is really good for you, because it's really easy to get prized amalgam back, and it's really hard for them to get their Tarmogoyfs back. Scourge Devil's a little bit different. It does the same thing as far as like makes your creatures bigger, so that it lets you win faster. But it's a creature too. It's got Unearth, so you can't counter it, which is kind of nice. And you need less power on the board to really do a lot of damage, since it comes in as a creature itself. You get 4 extra damage just from it itself. It only pumps
Yeah.
your guys +1 instead of +2. But one of the cool things is, since it's a creature and it has an earth and it comes out from your graveyard, it triggers all your prized amalgams.
Yep.
So you can get your Scourge Devil into play, attack with it, and then at the end of the turn, get your prized amalgams. So
Yeah, it says all creatures, not other creatures. So it does pump itself.
yeah, the Scourge Devil does pump itself.
Yep.
So basically, that's how the deck works. You cast your draw spells, you discard your cards, and then instead of drawing, for the most part, you dredge. You get basically your entire deck into your graveyard, and you put a bunch of creatures into play, like Prized Amalgam, Bloodghast, and Narcomoeba, and then you attack them. So it's a pretty cool deck. It's really fun. It's really, really good game 1 win percentage. Sideboard games are a little bit tougher because you have a lot of really powerful graveyard hate cards. But we've got good ways of dealing with those cards. We've got Abrupt Decays and Nature's Claims. A lot of their graveyard hate cards are artifacts and enchantments that put into play. So we've got ways of killing those artifacts and enchantments. We've also got Ancient Grudge. It's good against artifact graveyard hate, which you can flash back to, which is pretty neat. So you can dredge over it and then cast it from your graveyard. It's also good against Affinity.
Yep.
We have Leyline of the Void. We have got a little bit of graveyard removal of our own for the mirror match. Leyline is probably the best graveyard hate spell for the job because it's just really powerful, and you aren't really drawing your deck cards from your deck very often anyway, so it's okay if you mill it over. It's not really doing anything. Then we've got some Collective Brutalities, which are really good against Burn, and they're also good in Dredge. They're really good in Dredge because the Escalate, discard a card, isn't even a drawback. It's kind of a bonus.
Yep.
So it actually reminds me a lot of Cathartic Reunion because you discard cards when you play it, and then you do things. Except instead of drawing 3 cards, you're just like killing off a creature and taking a spell out of there. Just really good.
Yeah.
We got Lightning Axe, just a good removal spell. The discard is a bonus, not a drawback. And we got Gnaw to the Bone, which is really good against Burn. You dredge it over, and then you flash it back, and you gain like 20 life. It's ridiculous. So,
I just love that these cards have advantages for discarding cards, but then it's a bigger advantage on the other side of the card.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that just makes this deck awesome.
I know, it's really, really cool. I had a lot of fun playing it last weekend, and I've had a lot of fun playing it on Magic Online for the last few weeks too. So looking forward to this league. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do some dredging, and we'll see you in a bit.